All right, so let's begin. We got a lot of news this morning. There's some new military actions that's happening in the Middle East. U.S. Central Command confirms it conducted what it's calling defensive strikes in southern Iran. This is the first such strike in weeks since the ceasefire was agreed to. It also comes, as the president says, talks with Iran were going well, and both sides said that they were closer to a deal. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is traveling in Asia, and he had this to say this morning.
I think there's strong alignment and agreement on what a preliminary draft should look like. I think that, like anything with something like this, it's going to take a couple days to settle on, even down to the disagreements over a word, sentence. So we'll have to work through that.
All right, let's bring in CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata. Charlie, what can you tell us about these new strikes?
Hey, Vlad, while you guys are on break, I was on the grind over the weekend. I'll tell you why, because but there's a good reason, because I've been in touch with folks from Central Command, right? They're in charge of the Middle East area, because it has been on a knife edge throughout the weekend. As it was explained to me, these U.S. forces are still forward postured, because even as these talks are taking place, the U.S. military is ready to go at a moment's notice. I asked 24 hours notice? No, at any moment's notice. So last night, as we learned, new strikes against Iran. And this is a statement from CENTCOM. When I contacted them, they said targets included missile launch sites and Iranian boats attempting to emplace mines. U.S. Central Command continues to defend our forces while using restraint during the ongoing ceasefire. So the ceasefire is still in place. There has been a bit of back and forth in the past. As far as I'm aware, the U.S. forces weren't fired on, but there was a threat because of missile placements and mine placements. And again, contacted CENTCOM this morning. As far as I'm aware, there hasn't been another event, as they call it. That happened yesterday, but they reserve the right to do it again, if necessary, if they feel threatened. At the same time, Tehran said this morning, and this is to be expected, they reserve the right to retaliate and intend to do so. So, as I said, as these talks are going on, the tensions in that region continue. If anything, they're escalating.
And I mean, so that's kind of the U.S. side of things. You mentioned that Tehran has said that they're willing to respond at any moment as well. What are the capabilities of the Iranian regime at this point?
Yeah, Kelly, you know, we've been reporting this since the ceasefire began when I was in Israel a few weeks ago, because certainly Israeli intelligence and intelligence picked up by New York Times and some of the contacts that we've had too say that Iran maintains between 50 to 70% of their missile launch capability. More importantly than that is the launchers themselves, not the arrows, but the archers. There are estimates that may be 50 to 60% of their launch capabilities. Now, when we're talking about drones, it's hard to tell. A lot of this stuff is happening underground, even with the United States and Israeli intelligence, exquisite intelligence, as they like to use. They have over-exaggerated, certainly in the United States has over-exaggerated, the Pentagon, the amount of missile launchers and missiles that have been taken out. So the Israelis are certainly cautious because they know that Iran remains capable of launching these missiles. So, yes, you have the battery of missiles that are still in place, the missile supply, and then the missile capacity, as in developing even more missiles. That may have taken a punch, because the United States, at least the officials I've spoken to, said that they've taken care of some of those factories and some of those rat runs throughout those tunnels that get missiles from one place to another. But for the missile supply that they have now and their launch capability, that's what we're looking at. 50 to 75% of their missile capability, 50 to 60% of their launch capability.
All right, Charlie D'Agata, on the grind as always, my friend. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right, let's turn to CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi, another person that is always on the grind as well. So, Olivia, the president seemed close to launching a new attack last week. Then, you know, we're hearing that these talks are going well. Now we're seeing these fresh strikes that we just talked about with Charlie. So what do we know about a timetable for these latest talks?
Yes, like Charlie, I too was working over the weekend, so glad you guys enjoyed Italy. That sounds great. I would love your itinerary for that, Kelly. But yes, the president and the White House is now warning that these talks and a firm deal are likely going to take a few days. We know that Iranian negotiators were in Qatar Monday trying to hammer out the parameters of some sort of deal. But there's two issues there, really. One issue being that the Iranians have been dragging their feet. That's what U.S. officials believe when it comes to these negotiations. And second, latest reporting from CBS News and our Jennifer Jacobs suggests that inside of Iran, it is difficult to get messages to the Ayatollah. It's sometimes taking them days to find couriers, to find the right people, to get the right information to the Ayatollah so they can make the deal. That's why this White House is saying partially that it's going to take more time, even though they feel like they're getting close, to really have this deal somewhat hammered out. But you're right, despite all of this, there are still defensive strikes ongoing. U.S. officials continue to say that a ceasefire is in place, even though we have seen more strikes in Lebanon from the Israeli forces, strikes overnight from U.S. forces into Iran. So really, it's in a fragile moment right now. The White House is saying there could be a deal soon. But again, the president overall has said there has to be a nuclear component to this. The Iranians have said, let's get a ceasefire first, and then we can talk about the nuclear component within the next 60 days. So the goalposts just continue to keep shifting. That is why this negotiation has been so hard.
So we know the president, Olivia, on another subject, is at Walter Reed for a physical this morning. What's going on there?
Yeah, actually, the president did just arrive there a short while ago for his annual physical. We should note he received one around this time last year, but there was another instance where the president went to Walter Reed back in October, and he had an MRI. We had asked repeatedly what the MRI was for. The president did not tell us specifically what it was for, but did say that he had what he called a very standard MRI, and then went on to say the doctor said it was the best result he had ever seen as far as this MRI, even though we don't know exactly what they were looking at. But this comes, of course, as the president turns 80 years old next month on June 14th. He is the oldest person to assume the presidency when he won back in 2024. And he's had a variety of health issues. We have noticed just in someone that's been covering him, he started to have some makeup on the back of his hands to cover up some bruising that we had seen there pretty consistently. He was also having an issue with deep vein thrombosis in his legs that was causing some swelling. We also know that the president was having some issues with some rashes on his neck that he was being treated for. So there are a variety of issues that the president has been treated for in his age. So we will be watching to see whatever the readout is today from this health visit.
All right, Olivia, appreciate it so much. Italy itinerary coming to your inbox soon.